man goes skiing in New York, ends up in Sacramento, California. 6 days later, what happened? Coming up next on Deceptions of the Ages News. Hello, everybody. A big and bizarre story that is unfolding as we speak is this account of a skier who was actually a Toronto firefighter, retired, went skiing in upstate New York, and ended up disappearing. He was found 6 days later, which was yesterday, dazed and confused near Sacramento, California. So, what happened? Okay, so from what the scant details that we do know, what we can say right now is that no matter what happened, because this is obviously so bizarre, ruling out a hoax, this is obviously some kind of a teleportation, a UFO abduction, or simply a hop through the space time continuum. So let's explore some of these possibilities and let's look into, has this happened before in the past? So what we do know right now is that the name of the firefighter is Konstantin Philippides, and he was skiing with some other retired firefighters at a ski slope in upstate New York, and later in the day they noticed that he was missing. Now, some of the bizarre details of this person gone missing is that his car was left in the parking lot. His ID and all his personal belongings were left at the ski slope, which ruled out the possibility of him having taken a flight, at least a commercial flight, out to California. So some other bizarre details about this disappearance is that when he showed up in Pasadena, or I'm sorry, he showed up in Sacramento, he still had his ski boots on, and he still had his ski helmet and his ski clothes and his helmet and his goggles, and he was obviously very confused. According to some channels on YouTube, some people are saying, oh, this is the Travis Walton incident. Same thing has happened with the logger Travis Walton when he was abducted in the 1970s, and he disappeared for a few days until he was found later on. But I would have to argue this, and here's why. When Travis Walton was abducted, there was an obvious witnesses saw an alien spaceship, right? They saw something come down and actually grab him. That didn't happen in this case. When Travis Walton was abducted, he was deposited or left almost near the same location where he had been abducted. And also, the final thing about the Travis Walton incident, or the final two things, is that he appeared to have been dehydrated, and he appeared to not have any clothes on, which meant that whatever he had with him when he was abducted was left on the alien spaceship. Now, none of these things happened in the case of Konstantin Philippides. So if this incident does not match that of the Travis Walton abduction, then we need to look into other incidents that are similar to this seemingly teleportation event. So let's look back in history and see if we can find something that resembles this event. The first incident we want to look at is that of the case of Gil Perez. In 1593, Gil Perez was serving as a palace guard in Manila for the governor's palace for the Spanish governor. And he suddenly found himself, he went to sleep and found himself in Mexico City. Now, if you're not familiar with the distance between Manila in the Philippines and Mexico City, it's over 3,000 miles, and you would have to cross the Pacific Ocean to do so. And in 1593, they didn't have airplanes or motorized transportation of any kind that would have explained his sudden jump from one area to the other. What is really interesting to note is that Perez found himself in an Spanish speaking, or actually within the Spanish Empire, within his teleportation experience, which was very lucky for him. Could you imagine showing up and everybody was speaking Chinese? Okay, the second seeming case of teleportation or somebody being in another place, and this is not exactly the same kind of teleportation, but this is the example of a woman called the Mary Jesus of Agreda. Now, she is a writer, a spiritualist, and an abbess, which means she's basically a nun living in Spain in an abbey. And they found out in the 1620s they sent a mission to convert some Indians in Mexico, and the Indians said they already had been converted. And when they asked who had converted them, they said a lady in blue had showed up and taught them about Jesus, so they were already Christians. Now, this lady was said to be insane, and that because she had claimed to have gone many times to teach these Indians, but they discounted her accounts, even though she had been corresponding with the King of Spain. But the Indians actually described her as the woman who converted them to Christianity. The next strange case of teleportation, also in the Spanish speaking world, is the case of Carlos Mirabelli. Mirabelli was a uh, spiritualist, he was a magician, he was a guy into these seances. And at one point, his friend said that he basically dematerialized at a train station in Spain. And a few minutes later, he called the train station from a train station 56 miles away. And then he asked the conductor for himself. And then he came and spoke to himself on the phone, according to this account. Another strange disappearance, also in the Spanish speaking world. I could tell you what, if I spoke Spanish, I'd be very careful. I think that Mr. Philippides was Greek, but we'll have to look into his language background. But there's also the final case of the Vidals, or the Vidals, and they were traveling through Buenos Aires in Argentina, or a remote area of Buenos Aires in Argentina, and they found themselves suddenly in Mexico City, some 6,400 miles away, with no explanation of how they got there. So here are four or five other incidents of people actually being in one location and then ending up in another location, and there being no physical or scientific explanation for how that happened. Now, that is the subject of my book, Deceptions of the Ages: Mormons, Freemasons, and Extraterrestrials, because now we have the science to begin to understand and explain how this stuff may have happened. Now, in my book, when we're talking about UFO technology, there are two things that I would like to talk to you about. The first thing is the use of resonance, and as an example, I'm going to use Otis Carr's flying saucer, a technology he claimed to have learned from Nikola Tesla. Now, I'm just going to read this account from Deceptions of the Ages, Mormons, Freemasons, and Extraterrestrials verbatim. So, this is what it says in the book. We got on board, and Carr said, what we're going to do is we're going to vibrate this craft to that particular frequency, the color aquamarine. So they fired it up, and this thing turned into this beautiful, brilliant aquamarine. The whole craft inside lit up. And then he said, okay, that's it. Come on, down to the debriefing. That's the end of the experiment. The experiment lasted 15 seconds. And he said, what you did was you went downrange 10 miles and came back. You resonated here for about 5 to 10 seconds, and for you it will probably equate to about 15 minutes, he said. Well, check your pockets. We had these little jumpsuits on and we emptied our pockets. There were stones and sticks and grass, and we piled it up. He said, where did that come from? Now, could Mr. Philippides, when he was skiing, somehow have begun to resonate himself so that he suddenly moved across time and space? Well, from what we do know about UFO technology, we do understand that, at least from what Bob Lazar says, is that when you create a very dense field and you create a lot of gravity, you are able to transverse time and space. Now, could Mr. Philippides, when he was skiing, somehow have begun to resonate himself so that he suddenly moved across time and space? Well, from what we do know about UFO technology, we do understand that, at least from what Bob Lazar says, is that when you create a very dense field and you create a lot of gravity, you are able to transverse time and space. Are these the only explanations? No, but I can assure you that whatever you're going to hear from the mainstream media is going to be nothing that has anything to do with science. So, this is Deceptions of the Ages News. We'll see you next time. Very quickly, I just want to point out that if you saw in the beginning of the video, the beginning of my videos are now that space is for rent. So if you want to join me on Patreon and become a Patreon sponsor, your site, your YouTube site, your business, whatever it is that you want to get out to people, we will put in the front of the video. And then we'll also mention your name here. You'll have your name listed at the end in the credits as the producer of the show. And we also have assistant producer packages as well.